These are the headlines that we're following at this hour. President Yoon in a televised public address urges doctors to return to their posts, indicating there could be room for negotiations. But as he stresses the need for an increase of 2,000 in medical school admissions, one of South Korea's biggest doctors groups shows its disappointment. South Korea unveils its plan to raise its biopharmaceutical exports to $10 billion by 2030, with the aim of making it the country's future growth engine. With the grand opening of the GTX-A line, which cuts travel time between Seoul and the greater capital area in half, nearly 20,000 people used the service on the first day. We talked to some of them on how they're finding it. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with President Yoon's personal address to the Korean public amid the walkout by trainee doctors entering into the 7th week. While he reiterated the need for a medical school admissions hike, he also said the government is open to talks if the doctors bring a unified and more rational solution to the table. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young leads us off.
President Yoon is urging the thousands of trainee doctors on strike to return to their patients, while hinting there's room for talks on their demands if they come up with more appropriate evidence-based proposals. This came on Monday as the president made a live televised address to the Korean public to stress the urgent need for medical reform, namely by expanding the annual quota of students admitted to medical schools by 2,000. The policy has been opposed by some 12,000 junior doctors who've staged a walkout since late February, compromising medical services nationwide and exacerbating staff shortages, particularly in already underserved areas outside Seoul. Yoon said 2,000 additional students is the minimum number of entrants needed to fundamentally strengthen the medical system, with demand for healthcare expected to rise in the rapidly aging country.
지금 당장 5,000명의 의사가 더 필요합니다. 결국 2035년까지 최소한 15,000명의 의사를 확충해야 합니다. 증원에 반대하는 이유가 장래 수입 감소를 걱정하는 것이라면 결코 그렇지 않습니다. 현재 우리나라 의사들의 평균 소득은 OECD 국가들 가운데 1위입니다. 20년 후에 의사가 2만 명이 더 늘어서 수입이 줄어들 것이라는 걱정은 기우에 불과합니다.
He noted that South Korea has a shortage of 80,000 doctors, falling below the OECD average of 3.7 clinicians per 1,000 people. That's despite the proportion of healthcare spending relative to GDP growing 3 times faster than the OECD average over the past 6 years. Thus, he said it would take about a decade for the additional medical students to expand the pool of qualified doctors, and at least 20 years for the number of doctors to increase by 20,000. Conveying his sorrow for the continued standoff between the government and junior doctors, Yoon said there will be legal consequences for the collective action taken by interest groups that threaten the lives and well-being of Korean citizens. He noted that some 8,800 are currently facing medical license cancellations.
제가 대통령으로서 앞으로 수많은 국민의 생명을 구하고 또 수많은 국민의 건강을 지켜낼 여러분을 제재하거나 처벌하고 싶겠습니까? 여러분은 대한민국의 매우 중요한 미래 자산입니다. 국민이 여러분에게 거는 기대와 여러분의 공적 책무를 잊지 말아 주시기 바랍니다. 환자가 기다리고 있는 의료 현장으로 조속히 복귀해 주십시오.
Although doctors' groups have rejected the government's call for dialogue, Yoon seemed to offer some room for negotiation, saying he is willing to discuss more appropriate and reasonable measures. The president said if the medical sector insists on lowering the number of additional entrants into medical schools, it should present scientific evidence and a unified set of measures to the government. Yoon reiterated his commitment to implementing an all-out medical reform to make quality healthcare available throughout the nation, fairly utilize and compensate medical workers, as well as protect them from excessive litigation. The President this month will launch a special committee under his supervision to promote dialogue between policymakers and the medical community in order to coordinate and initiate a comprehensive reform. Arirang News.
Regarding President Yoon's national address, senior doctors have criticized, saying that the speech did not offer any solutions to resolve the medical service disruption. Finding the right care will become more challenging as outpatient services and surgeries are being reduced amid the continued absence of junior doctors from hospitals. Our Shin reports.
Senior doctors have expressed disappointment with President Yoon's medical reform speech, saying they could not find any differences from previous announcements by the government. During a briefing on Monday, the Korean Medical Association stated that doctors were hoping that President Yoon was going to come up with some solutions. Countering the president's statement that there had been discussions with the medical community regarding the medical school enrollment quota expansion, the KMA emphasized that doctors' opinions have not been considered at all. As of Monday, medical school professors at general hospitals have begun reducing outpatient services and surgeries. Because of the en masse walkout by trainee doctors 7 weeks ago, the medical professors keeping hospitals running are suffering from fatigue. Professors from 20 schools at 40 nationwide stated last Saturday that 1 day off will be mandatory after working continuously for 24 hours. They added that outpatient services and surgeries for severe and emergency patients will be scheduled based on this. The KMA, the biggest doctors group in the country, also announced doctors who run private clinics will shorten their working hours to 40 hours per week. On Monday, the health ministry urged the medical community to withdraw their collective actions and reiterated its measures to keep the health system functioning.
Government will closely examine the operating of emergency rooms and strengthen the emergency medical system. The government will provide available personnel to the fullest and continuously monitor the professors' reduced working hours and resignations.
While there haven't been significant changes on the first day since outpatient services and surgeries were reduced, eyes are now on whether they'll be reduced even further. Shin, Arirang News.
On the trade front, South Korea's exports in March edged up compared to the same period a year before, logging an on-year increase for 6 consecutive months. It was driven by the biggest outbound shipments of semiconductors in nearly 2 years. Our An Sung-jin has the latest.
South Korea's trade balance for March was in the black for the 10th consecutive month. Data from the Trade Ministry on Monday indicated that the figure hit $4.28 billion. This was led by a strong performance in exports, which were positive for the 6th straight month. Exports for March increased by 3.1% compared to the year before, reaching $56.56 billion. Meanwhile, imports dropped by 12.3%. Ship exports increased by more than 100%. And for the first time in 24 months, exports of all 4 IT subcategories, semiconductors, displays, computers, and peripheral devices, saw an increase. In particular, semiconductor exports rose by nearly 40% on year, reaching their highest value since June 2022. An official from the Trade Ministry says that this is a sign of an upward trend.
Chip demand remains strong as inventories for mobile and PC chips continue to fall. Supply also continues to increase by more than 40%. Prices are also expected to rise further throughout the year, projecting a positive outlook.
With the strong performance in IT exports, exports to IT retail and production hubs like Vietnam and Hong Kong rose. China was South Korea's largest export market overall, while the value of exports to the U.S. surged to a record high. The trade minister pledged to continue this economic growth by providing 1 trillion won or $743 million of support for exporting companies. He added that the trade balance is expected to keep seeing surpluses throughout the second quarter on the back of strong chip, car, and ship exports. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea announces its plan to raise its production and exports of biopharmaceuticals, aiming to nurture the sector into the country's new growth engine, comparable to that of semiconductors. Here's our Moon Hae-ryun with the details.
The government unveiled its vision to increase exports of biopharmaceuticals to $10 billion by 2030. In a meeting on Monday with industry insiders from domestic firms such as Samsung Biologics and Celltrion, the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy announced comprehensive measures to fund and support growth in the sector. The ministry will allocate 2.1 trillion Korean won, over $1.5 billion for these starting this year and lasting until 2030. The ministry also expects to attract over $13 billion in private investment to boost production to more than $11 billion and exports to $10 billion. These funds will be used to support research and development, create an ecosystem for biological materials, fund parts and equipment used during manufacturing, and to establish an industrial base. In addition to financial support, a Korean version of the US BioMade project will be set up following a preliminary study. BioMade was established in the United States in 2020 as a non-profit institute that collaborates with public and private entities to advance sustainable and reliable bio-industrial manufacturing technologies. Other than bookmarking foreign agencies, South Korea will also strengthen cooperation with leading international organizations to accelerate the production and commercialization of biopharmaceutical products. As well as increasing exports, the ministry will set up a solid domestic supply chain by 2030. Aiming to localize the production of biopharmaceuticals and raise the domestic production rate to 15%. The ministry revealed a three-step roadmap spanning until 2033 to secure 80 different core materials and the equipment needed to make this vision a reality. This announcement from the industry ministry follows President Yoon Suk-yeol's pledge last week to invest heavily in R&D of advanced biotechnology and set up a cluster of bio companies. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Shifting gears, many elections around the world are scheduled for this year, affecting almost half of the global population. It's imminent here in South Korea with less than 10 days left until the general election. Our National Assembly correspondent Lee Si-hoo sat down with experts to see what this election means, not only for South Korea, but for other countries around the world.
2024 has been dubbed the ultimate election year, with national elections scheduled or expected in at least 64 countries. Taiwan was one of the first to lead the way, electing its new president in January, and later this year in November, the U.S. will elect its new president. As for South Korea's 22nd general election, political science and foreign diplomacy experts say it's garnering much global attention.
I think it's an object of interest not only in Asian countries but also around the world, because it will have a great influence on not just the Asian order but also the world order, depending on what kind of conservative and progressive governments are established.
The election carries special implications for other democracies.
I think that South Korea's elections can have many implications for liberal democracies in terms of the democratic responsibility of the administration or parliament, as the retreat of democracy emerges as an important topic in the global community today.
The election results will determine the makeup of the assembly, which is currently controlled by the opposition.
From the general perspective, definitely the election has a meaning of the midterm election for the incumbent Yoon government. So definitely the results have a significant impact on the remaining political tenures for President Yoon's.
The question is, how will it change foreign relations?
Because from the trilateral cooperation perspective, United States and the Japanese sides want to be for a pro-US ally party, but as you know, the divided foreign policy approach from the incumbent party and the opposition party. So,
if the conservative ruling party wins this election, I think the existing Korea-US relationship will be very resilient. Then I think the relationship between the Yoon Suk-yeol government and the Biden government in the United States will be more closely established. On the contrary, if the Democratic Party wins the majority, it's expected that the Asia-Pacific diplomatic relations centered around Korea, the US and Japan, sought by the Yoon Suk-yeol administration, will take some time.
Experts say inter-Korean relationships could also take a different shape as the ruling and opposition parties pursue divided approaches. Hawk-like policies are expected from the ruling party, while more reconciliation with Pyongyang is expected from the opposition. As South Korea faces many geopolitical, inter-Korean and industrial challenges, political experts say that the country is at a crucial crossroads of choices that will determine its national future. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
New KTX trains that are faster and stop at fewer stations will be operating from May, shortening the time it takes to get from Seoul to Busan to 2 hours and 10 minutes and Seoul to Gwangju to 1 hour and a half. The announcement came on Monday as President Yoon Suk-yeol joined the KTX's 20th anniversary celebrations at Korea Railroad headquarters in Daejeon. The new type of train, which was developed domestically, can reach up to 320 kilometers per hour. It has been named Cheongryong, or Blue Dragon in English, a name selected through a national contest, with 2024 being the year of the Blue Dragon. President Yoon also reiterated his plans to connect more cities with the KTX system to make everywhere in the nation reachable in less than 3 hours. Staying with high-speed rail, with the grand opening of the GTX-A line, which cuts travel time between Seoul and the greater capital area in half, nearly 20,000 people used the service on the first day. Our Park Gun-woo talked to some of them on how they were finding it.
Partial operation of Line A of the Great Train Express, or GTX, began on March 30th. According to the Transport Ministry, almost 19,000 people used the service, which runs between Seoul and the greater metropolitan area, on the first day, despite it being the weekend. That was around 2,000 people more than the ministry had projected.
I think the GTX will allow people from far places to commute more conveniently, and I think I can also consider of job flipping to other regions as well.
It was difficult to ride the bus with my child, but now with this train, I think I will be visiting Seoul more often.
Since the GTX-A line is now in operation from Suseok southern Seoul to Dongtan in Gyeonggi-do province, I'm going to check how long it actually takes from the moment I pass through the turnstile until I reach Dongtan. It took around 5 minutes to travel the 40 meters underground by escalator to the platform. Then it was just 20 minutes to Dongtan, a journey that would have taken around an hour by car or bus. With the train running at an average speed of around 110 kilometers per hour and up to a top speed of 180 kilometers per hour, the GTX is 2 to 3 times faster than a normal subway. As you can see, it took 30 minutes for me to get from Suseok to Dongtan station. Trains usually run at 20-minute intervals, but that gap shortens to 17 minutes during peak hours, which is usually longer than normal subways, so checking train schedules is advised.
I wish the interval between trains becomes shorter at peak times.
The government said it would try to run more trains after the other parts of the A line are connected in order to reduce intervals. Some people also raised concerns about safety issues when riding the GTX.
I am a bit worried about accidents, as this is a high-speed train.
The Transport Ministry said the government will work on ways to address issues raised by citizens, with the Transport Minister also saying more employees will be deployed at each station to alleviate worries. He added he'll do his best so that other GTX lines, including the other part of the A line, will swiftly begin operation. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea's hanji, traditional paper made from mulberry tree, has been submitted to be included on the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity list. The Cultural Heritage Administration announced on Monday that it had been submitted nomination documents for the traditional knowledge and skills associated with the production of hanji and related cultural practices to UNESCO. Hanji is a form of traditional handmade paper known for its intricate, multi-step production process and exceptional quality. The final decision on its inscription will be made on December 2026 at the Intergovernmental Committee for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage. On the cultural front, a few months ago, we brought you a story introducing Maestro Yapvan Sveden, the new music director of the Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra. Turns out he'll be joined by his longtime friend Guus Hiddink in elevating the orchestra to, in his words, the absolute top. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
2002 is a year Korea will never forget. The Korean men's national football team reached the World Cup semifinals for the first time, its best performance to date. At the heart of this miracle was Guus Hiddink, the then manager of the team. 22 years later, Mr. Hiddink has returned to Korea, this time for the arts. The Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra, one of the country's oldest orchestras, has appointed him as its honorary ambassador. Its new music director, Yapvan Sveden, played a big role in the former coach accepting the offer. Their friendship dates back decades when Mr. Hiddink watched a documentary featuring the maestro.
And I saw the similarities, what we try to do to get the best out of an individual player and to melt it to a team performance. And that's why I approached him.
Beyond their Dutch heritage, it's their shared values that bind them together.
We like also to help people. And I have my foundation. Hiddink has his foundation. And where we see big friendship in similarities is that we see that people who need help in life, we like to help them. And we see how important it is.
Despite stepping down as coach of the Korean national team after the 2002 World Cup, Korea holds a special place in Mr. Hiddink's heart. He became the first honorary Korean in 2002 and has been leading the Guus Hiddink Foundation since 2007, building futsal fields nationwide to make football more accessible for the disadvantaged and disabled. As an ambassador for the SPO, he's dedicated to that same goal.
When I was a soccer player, a football player, in the early days, very early days, they sent us to clubs, to university, to high schools, outside our training, outside our matches, which means that we bring our football to schools and to universities and to clubs. We have to bring also music, classical music or whatsoever, into the school system as well.
Football and orchestra music may seem worlds apart, but they share the ability to bring people together, from the players to the audience. And that's what Mr. Hiddink hopes to do. Promote harmony through music by introducing Seoul Philharmonic to the world. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Warm spring sunshine has welcomed the beginning of April. The whole country was mostly sunny today and the air quality was good as well. Tomorrow will be much warmer than today, both in the morning and the daytime. Seoul will start off at 8 degrees Celsius and temperature will soar up to 23 throughout the day. Do expect wide temperature gaps with such warm conditions. As sunny weather continues, the atmosphere is drying out around the central areas. Dry advisories have been issued in Yeongdong, Gangwon-do Province, Seoul, and some parts of Gyeonggi-do Province. Please be extra careful with fire accidents in these areas. There is spring rain forecast everywhere tomorrow. Starting with Jeju Island in the afternoon, it will rain in the southern parts of the country from night. It will expand nationwide on Wednesday. Tomorrow, Daejeon and Gyeongju will start off at 6 degrees. Highs will be topping out in the 20s all over the country. Another round of rain will be seen on Thursday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is all for this newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 10 p.m. with the AI headline news. Hope everyone has a great start to the week.